am a boxcar child, and I can pull together the broken pieces or the fragments or the things necessary to create a sense of home in order to find not just survival, but joy.
Welcome to Coffee Break, where we invite you to walk on the path of self-discovery with us. I'm Fatima, joined by my co-hosts, Liz and Grace, 3 women from different walks of life, united by our passion for purposeful living, authentic connection, and service to others. We recognize that the journey of self-discovery is not a solitary one. You are not meant to walk on this path alone. We need each other in this fast-paced world. Through our vulnerable conversations, we explore life's challenges and provide hope and solutions. We invite you to grab a cup of coffee and take a break with us. She's a very special woman because I feel like she's multi-talented, multifaceted, very intuitive, very empathetic, and she really strives to be extraordinary, and she is extraordinary. So I'd like to turn it over to Laura-Gayle. Welcome to the table. Oh, and by the way, what's so special about this episode is we have, of course, Liz and Grace here, who they've been best friends for years. And Laura-Gayle and I have been best friends for years. So this is almost like the best friends edition. Yeah. Liz and I are close friends now. And Grace and I have gotten, so we're just like all into this together. It's one big friendship. So over to you.
Thank you. It's just such an honor to be here and to share with all of you. I am a single empty nester who also made a choice to stop the career before true retirement age. So I left the school right before COVID, and kind of the ball started rolling down the hill there when I decided to leave the school and pursue truly unknown, uncharted territory.
For viewers that don't know what a Montessori school is, could you give us a little bit of insight on that? And then I know when you're building something and leading something, I don't know too much about what your role was there, but I know it can be very difficult to know when to let go or when to, decide to let someone else take over, especially when it's like something you've poured your blood, sweat, and tears into. Can you tell us a little bit about what led you to that decision and how you went about it?
Sure. The Montessori method of education is non-traditional. It's developed around completely identifying with the individual as a whole being and not summarizing a group of children into one journey, one learning path, one style, one presentation. So when you think about individuality, this methodology of teaching embraces individuality as deeply as one could imagine. So that just always resonated with me from my college training in education. And that's what my degree was in. My degree was actually in special needs, so in learning disabilities and behavior disorders, which gave me the introduction to Montessori. So fast forward a long time, and we had a school in our area that was closing down. And I knew I wanted my 2 younger children to be able to attend. So basically decided to buy the existing school and relocate it. What that encompassed was truly designing a campus. Bought property, sat down with pencil and paper, sketched out what this farmhouse style campus would look like. Built it, multiple buildings, all very home oriented, in the middle of 14 acres of farmland. So there was that element of nature, organic, reality-based approach to nurturing and growing a love of learning.
And I've worked at many schools, and it was one of the most serene, peaceful environments because of the plants, the flowers, the trees, all of the furniture inside just matched nature, so it was seamless from the outdoor to the indoor. And so, yeah, it was one of the best schools I've ever worked at.
Thank you.
Wow.
I didn't really realize at the time my affinity for nature. Reflecting on it more now that I have some space, I'm seeing how easy it was for me to put that element or to adopt that element or to be aligned with that element. First was the alignment, and then just how easy it was to move there. So to walk away from that after 17 years, it was just such a transformative period. I acknowledged and had really spent a lot of years, especially once I met Fatima, with self-development and being able to really learn about what my true strengths were and what my liabilities were. And really, that was instrumental in my decision to leave the school, because I knew that what I had done thus far was what I was capable of doing, and that if it were going to ever turn a corner or shift, that I needed to somewhat get out of the way of that. And that was a double-edged sword in a way, because it also meant that I had to trust that whatever my purpose was in growing the school and, well, first creating it, maintaining it and attempting to grow it, and then walking away from it, that whatever that was, the outcome wasn't necessarily my responsibility or my work. Mm-hmm. That's probably one of the most challenging things that has happened in my life, was understanding that some things maybe we're meant to start, but not necessarily see through to the very end.
Wow.
Yeah.
What really impressed me during that time is not only was she founder and leader, and she also was a mother.
Well, what I'll say is one of the very big motivators for even starting the school was my children. I did it for my children. I wanted them to have the opportunity to have the Montessori experience. And I knew if the other school was closing down, that it just wasn't feasible for us to consider the distance that would be involved to go to another Montessori school. And I had never done anything of that magnitude. So I had no idea what it was really going to reveal or require. My husband at the time, was also a business owner. And so I was very aware of what it meant to run your own business and the weight and responsibility and, amount of commitment. But basically I just, there was so much passion and so much joy and satisfaction out of the work that it only was really after the fact that I could really be objective about the impact that it had on my children, because it was so consuming. Even though I can acknowledge that there were so many positive things that came out of it for a lot of people, a lot of family, a lot of children, it often is hard for me to reconcile the negative impact that it had on my two youngest children in particular, in terms of always being there, just the hours that were invested in it. Now that they're aging and becoming more self-reflective as well, then I'm starting to see some of the light in their experience, and they're able to share some of the nuggets of their childhood there and the experiences they had, and on a deeper level what it meant to be able to have some of those experiences.
And I can certainly relate, because I've made a decision or two that was for the benefit of my children. But when I look back, or after they told me, it was more like a sacrifice. And I've had to reconcile some of my choices. What I think is so beautiful about her experience is now she has a grandchild who's at that very school that she started.
I feel like not many parents can say, like, oh, I wanted a better education or a better life for my kids, so I started an entire school. That is incredible. My parents, for example, wanted me to have a better education or school district, so we moved to be in a better school. But not many parents can say, I bought land and I started an entire school and built it out for 17 years. So I feel like your kids most definitely see the sacrifice you made, even if it took you away from them at times. I feel like we all, as we get older, understand the sacrifices our parents had to make. And I'm sure that they can see that it was all out of love.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I just wanted to go back a little bit to the transition period coming out from being in charge of this school. So where are you at now, or when did that happen in the timeline of things?
Sure. That happened in 2019. So now where I am is quite free. I'm quite the opposite of consumed with the care and responsibility and liability of a whole lot of little humans. And that is a freedom that can also be very daunting as well, because you do get into a rhythm or a system of functioning. And even if it's not ultimately the healthiest way to conduct your life, that familiarity, that predictability can be very grounding. Even if you know you're going to be answering emails or dealing with disgruntled parents or stressed out staff members, into the evening after you've put your children in bed or attempted to take them to, extracurriculars, that's still a mode of function and survival. So being away from all of that care and responsibility, for me, has put me in a state of displacement. And so it's taken a lot of just consideration for myself, which again is very unnatural, to be able to say, you don't have to have this figured out immediately. I've always been a problem solver by nature, and this was a problem I couldn't solve immediately. So attempting to embrace the space while at the same time physically changing space. So then COVID occurred, and that, of course, displaced us all and put new people. For me, it was some of my children back in the home with me. So that was another transition. And then the next really big one was the decision to sell the family home, the home that was my children's home. Many, many deep woven factors that went into that. Leaving that home that I'd been in for 30 years and moving to what I had told myself was temporary, the next home that was just kind of a convenience scenario, settling into that and what that means in terms of creating a space that now was about me and about my next chapter. So that's kind of where I am now. I've been in that home for almost 3 years. And
we moved at the same time out of our family home.
Right.
Really? Wow.
So it really, the whole displacement is just now starting to, iron itself out. And that has come with a lot of turmoil, a lot of emotional unpacking that was not anticipated. So I became uncomfortable with the freedom and the lack of responsibility. And then I became uncomfortable with the isolation of COVID and the fact that now I had other family members living in the house. And then I became extremely uncomfortable as I uprooted my entire past 30 years and having a family unit that had also been, somewhat dissected in the ending of my marriage. So that was another layer of displacement. Moving into this other home, and then...
That you did not like at all at first, that you complained about, that you're like, I can't believe I'm here, this is just temporary.
Yeah, temporary.
But then you did a major renovation because I can't stay in this hovel without having some basics.
Right.
And so,
right,
so I was going from a main home to an apartment
apartment.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we really talked and commiserated a lot during that time.
We could talk for hours about the layers of that transition from a family home farm to a small brick house where, only a fraction of your story fits. And not only would it only hold certain pieces of furniture, but what did I do with the story, the parts that were the family story? This is no longer the family's house or home. So just even packing up the boxes, what was going into storage for figuring out later, and what was going to the temporary home, which in my head was going to be extremely short term. I wasn't going to fall in love with it. I wasn't going to decorate it. It was, it was just a stepping stone. I was very wrong. I had anticipated a whole different play out of emotions, play out of logistics, like even just the physical space and how I was going to come and go from this home, how I was going to relate to the community.
I remember talking to her right before it happened, and I was excited because I was thinking, my new chapter has started. I'm going to, have my apartment and just me here, and only one child will be with me part-time, and that did not pan out like that. I actually had a college student come home with me, and that sense of community that I had didn't transfer. Even though I was still in the same metropolitan area, I felt like I was starting over.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't know it until you got there. So every day brought a new epiphany.
Exactly.
And one of the things we have in common is that we're problem solvers. So we were trying so hard to solve this problem, but I don't think at that point we even knew what the problem was, and so when you can't even identify the problem, you're just trying to use the old mindset to fix it as soon as possible so we'll feel better, so things will get better. And I think that we've supported each other through getting to a space where we don't have all the answers, not even for ourselves, but for our families. We've changed how we've removed ourselves as what's the word when you feel like everybody comes to you for answers, whether they're going to respect it or not?
Right. Well, I felt like orchestrating.
Yes.
I felt like my role for so many years, not just professionally, not just trying to, lead a school with, 20 staff members and upwards of, 70 to 100 little humans in it, but I was orchestrating the whole family. And that goes back, many layers from even teenage and young adult. But it's the coordinator. It's the master coordinator of all things and facilitating ideal environments so the outcomes can be the most positive and enjoyable for every party involved. So that's, in
cruise director.
Yeah, exactly. Service coordinator.
Right.
I had that title one time, pre-marriage and pre-career. I was, working in a restaurant actually, and I was the service coordinator. Mm-hmm. I think I kind of continued that role right on through the rest of my adulthood. I've since put that aside. Now I can utilize it when I need to. And if I'm with a group or an organization, it wants to come out badly when there's a problem or when somebody has trouble being decisive or coming up with a plan of action. That part of me is just like over here wanting to erupt out and say, okay, well, this is what we need to do. Somebody give me a whiteboard. But with my family, through part of the grieving process of the transition and the displacement of home, what was my home as their mother raising the three children, and then what is my home as Laura-Gayle. That was the epiphany that took place in this new space, this new physical space, recognizing and being open to Laura-Gayle as an individual. Really just giving myself permission to be. and to not orchestrate and not work so intentionally for the sake of others.
Yeah. That's one of the questions I'm starting to ask myself when I want to dive in. Is this my work or their work?
Mm-hmm.
And I tell my kids now, I think that's your work. That's fairly recent that I've started to really make more of a delineation. And I think the more we center ourselves and acknowledge that we have needs and wants and desires completely separate as moms, wives, sisters, daughters, the more we can say that it actually benefits not just us, but our kids, for them to have their work, because they're separate from us now.
Mm-hmm.
And when your moms like Laura-Gayle and I are, it was our top priority. Our families were like everything. All of my jobs centered around how I could accommodate my kids. I was joking the other day to one of my kids who's about to have a baby, and I was like, none of you all were in daycare, because I always figured out a way to take you all to work with me when I was a Montessori teacher, except for one of them. She had a short stint and I couldn't stand it, 6 months. So the point is, I completely understand that phase of life that not everybody gives themselves permission to go into, of I deserve a space that reflects and honors me. That does not mean that we don't have great relationships with our kids, but it definitely can cause bumpiness when they're so accustomed to us centering them and their needs.
Yeah.
Well, and I think along the same lines, what I'm trying to acknowledge is that because educating and being an educator is so deep within me, that what helps ground me through this process is saying, perhaps if I am the best I can be, the best version of me, whatever that looks like, if that means pursuing things I've been interested in that I've put on the back burner, or things I've not explored because I needed to be available or responsible for other people, those kinds of things, that right now, if I can focus on being the healthiest version of this single, almost retired grandmother and mother, that's the gift I can now give to my children and my granddaughter. And so that's my work. And while it may look like it's play and maybe even a little self-centered at times, what it really is it's evolving to what I need to be or want to be for their sake still.
There's so many things you said that I feel like a lot of people can resonate with, a lot of moms, and even moms who maybe are still in it with their kids, aren't empty nesters, but are in a place where they've lost their identity, or they identify so much with their work, whatever it might be, and with raising their kids, that when you become an empty nester, it's like kind of a catalyst to focus your attention on, like, wait a minute, like, who am I, or what do I like to do? Where do I belong? Before we shift into your work that you mentioned, I wanted to ask, is there any advice you could say to moms out there who are experiencing that loss of identity, or that realization that they've forgotten who they are along the way?
Well, there's nothing super profound that comes to mind immediately, but what I think has happened for me is allowing myself the space and the time and the emotionality to find the threads that take me back in time and connect me to my identity on different levels and in different layers of my adulthood, or the years I was raising my children. Here's an example, and this might sound a little trivial, but I'm thinking of this glass terrarium type house. It was shaped like a house, almost like a little greenhouse, tabletop version. And when I built Oak Grove, this terrarium glass house this is all just coming together right now in this moment. Sat on the entry table to the school for a majority of those years. And into the house, the lid was hinged. I would put pieces of nature, objects from nature, and it evolved over time. It might have been a bird nest, that my son found. It might have been a seed from a tree that someone walked in with. It might have been a rock that I brought back from, gone on vacation or something. And I'm just overwhelmed right now thinking about the symbolism of that box being shaped, first of all, like a house or a home, and then thinking about the pieces that were slowly put into the box to the home and what they represented. Not just the fact that they were collective. It was a collective from, not just me. It wasn't just about me. It was about others who had discovered something, something that then I saw value in and treasured it to go into this, very specific space. And now I'm thinking about all of the children that walked by and stopped and looked into that. And almost more importantly, that were allowed to stop and allowed to pause and take it in and be curious about it. Some of these were so young they weren't even verbal, but they were just absorbing those bits and pieces of nature that had come together and grown, over time. And that's a thread for me to see that object, that tangible thing. The process that occurred has been happening my whole life. Building those pieces, putting them together into a space that could be reflected on, could be observed, could be appreciated, could be just whatever that observer needed, whether it's a 3-year-old or an adult. And that also representing my personal love and connection to nature now, and how much of an emphasis that has always been, whether or not I compartmentalized it, whether or not I put it in a little glass box-shaped house on the table, or whether I'm submerging my physical self in it now.
Well, it's so funny because we were on a trip in Mexico, and I would always chuckle because I would look back and Laura-Gayle would be looking at something. And she said one thing about her life now is that she notices. She takes the time to notice. But when I was working with her, working for her, I thought she did, because everything seemed so detailed and there was so much reverence around detail. So I think it was just a natural gift. So I saw it, but in those days, I think for you, it was about productivity, results, outcomes. Mm-hmm. And so I can definitely hear you and say, oh, now I get it. The next level or the deeper meaning of what nature means for you now. Because I would think you were always focused on nature. But now this part of behind the scenes is helping me to understand a lot better of everything right now.
I think what's beautiful about that is you mentioned threads. So it sounds like if you look, you can find it because it was always there. Like even in the busyness, even with what you were doing with the school, like you mentioned this terrarium that was sitting there and you always were adding things. And today it sounds like your work, nature is very much ingrained, and that was your thing, your thread that is a place of belonging for you. So if you feel like you've lost it, if you take time to pause like those kids did and look around, you can find those threads. So I think that's very beautiful. Can you tell us a little bit about the way nature is in your work today and where you are in this season of life?
Sure. Woo-wee. I jokingly said to a friend this weekend, I think I'm supposed to be a biologist next. Really. And I am so excited. first of all, let me also add that in my work while I was still leading the school, one of the things that I started investigating and exploring was emotional intelligence as well as strengths and use of the work. I can't tell you the author's name off the top of my head, but Strength Finders.
Clifton.
That's
Gallup.
Clifton?
Yeah, they're called Gallup now.
Yes. Wow. Talk about illumination. So interconnectivity is one of my strengths. And once that was summarized and gave me such clarity, having a vocabulary word to assign to what I was experiencing, with the interconnectivity of things and the strong belief. It's the belief in the interconnectivity. It's not just, oh, you see the connection between A, B, C, D, and E, F. It's the belief that that is true. So now what is happening is through the grieving of the transition, leaving the career, leaving the family home, moving into this other place of who am I as a single adult woman living, alone, comes the interconnectivity of my past and my identity and weaving together the new opportunities, new platform, new net that I can stand on or lay down and rest on if I need to. And it all comes back to nature. I started painting during COVID. My oldest daughter is an established artist, and she had done a little workshop, a little watercolor workshop. And to be an encourager and support her event, I showed up. And I had no idea, I had no intention of ever painting again after that night, but I did. And very slow in the beginning. There was no immediate, in my opinion, there was no immediate or obvious skill, but I did pick it up every now and again. And then during COVID, that was the moment, because things were what they were, and it gave me an opportunity and space and time. And so painting became an exercise as part of the day. Because I also am very, A-type personality, very calculated and organized in my thought process when I approach something. Painting also needed an organized approach. It also, the materials needed to be organized. And as soon as I gave myself permission to not put away the materials, that also opened up the opportunity to really do painting as a legitimate activity or exercise. And so I did that. I created a space that was beautiful. And that also draws you to want to do it as if it's in a beautiful, presented in a beautiful way. So I was always, in the beginning, not sure, what do I paint? What's my subject matter? So I started out painting houses, stay-at-home houses, #stay at home.
Wow, this is about home. And the first thing was, here's the interconnectivity.
It's all coming together.
Yes. So everybody I knew or could get an address for received a painting of a home with, at the bottom, #stay at home.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Wow.
I didn't mail you one?
I did not. What a reveal. I feel slighted. You owe me the #stay at home.
Can I request one too? I just met you, but I would like one as well.
That is so funny. So I'll tell you what my first inclination is right now is I made a list of who I sent them to. And so what I feel inclined to do is go back and check my list. Is it possible that it's lost in the mail? 2024, it's still out there.
Right.
It's coming to you.
Circulating.
Yes, so these homes were very one-dimensional and just so primitive, so beginner, so kindergarten-like. But they had a lot of meaning. So once I was able to move past the houses, I started painting stacked stones.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that on
Yes.
Instagram.
that's like all I could paint is stacked stones. And I wasn't really, my oldest daughter, that's the artist, she would give me feedback and I would ask her for feedback, but family members don't always, aren't necessarily your best choice for feedback. I wanted somebody who would be like really hard on me and really, critical. So I gathered a stack of them and begged another local artist and friend if she would please let me drop off this envelope, do the COVID method. And she could just, quickly put some Post-it notes on it and give me some feedback about, is this, just, should I burn these paintings? What should I do? How do I improve? All that kind of stuff. Anyway, I also didn't understand why I was doing stacked stones. Other than I did like rocks. I do love rocks. And I do collect rocks. Not in a real formal way, in that they are just all over my house. And they come from places, that I've walked or traveled. But I really felt like I need an answer about why I'm drawn to this. Why does this feel so good? And of course, eventually when I would allow myself the opportunity to evaluate that kind of thing, I was able to say, I remember traveling to Canada, and at the time I had walked into a shop somewhere and there were these, well, they call them inuksuks. I know some people, here in the States typically call them Karens, but they're directionals. They give direction.
They're rocks?
They're rocks. So the Inuit people would use these because in their environments, that were so harsh, Arctic type environments, you didn't have road signs. And you didn't know what would be able to withstand the elements. So they would stack rocks to give direction, geographiable direction. So I was fascinated by that. I remember buying, I was a head of school at the time. I can remember buying a book about them to take back to the school so we could educate the children about inuksuks. And I even bought one as a little souvenir where someone had, stacked them and glued them together and brought that back with me. And still at the time, I was fascinated more about the historical component of them. And I guess the attractiveness to the stacking, so sculpturally. But I was not thinking about
painting. Being an artist.
Right? I also wasn't thinking about seeking direction, which I didn't know I needed. And so as I started painting these Karens, which now the relevance to hiking and staying on the trail.
Which is something she does now.
Which is what I do, what I enjoy so much. So now just the relationship between that early experience and bringing it back and then later connecting it to my own interest in hiking and exploring unknown spaces to me and using those for guidance, and then being in this somewhat tumultuous and chaotic space in my life and my transition and needing some form of guidance and direction. And what do I do? What do I do? Why am I doing this? Why am I painting rocks? Why do I feel good painting rocks? Why are people attracted to my rocks? Why is this a positive thing? So that has been instrumental, in exploring some of these next passions and the interconnectivity, of nature. So now let me circle back to putting those stack of really crude, rudimentary kindergarten style paintings in the friend's mailbox. She came back and one of her notes and suggestions was that I buy light to shine onto my rocks so that I could see better the dimensionality and the reflection and the shadow. What was interesting in that was that there were no stacked rocks that I was painting. I was painting them just intuitively.
Oh.
From my head.
Okay.
Wow. I got chills.
Yeah. So she made the assumption like most people do.
If you're painting something that you actually are,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that even just, artificially creating, if you don't have a reference photo, then you just artificially create it, right? But I wasn't doing that. So these were truly being taken from inside, myself and my experiences with nature, with touching stones, with stacking stones myself. Even though I had not really given much merit to that actually happening until all these little pieces had to come together to acknowledge that, which again goes back to figuring out who you are. Well, I couldn't have come to that point where I'm painting stacked stones or cairns that are beautiful and believable without pulling the threads of myself from my past, my evolution together. So these really are representative of me, both past and present.
I just want to say that it's interesting the way your journey played out, because people often, I feel like, you don't forget who you are all at once overnight. You lose pieces here and there, and it sounds like in your journey of coming together and finding your trail again, it didn't come all at once. Like, you were like, why am I drawing these rocks? Why am I drawing these houses? And it's these things that are, like you said, coming from inside of you. You weren't even looking at anything, so it's a part of you. And the threads, you were pulling at them, you were chasing after them, and now it sounds like it's all come together into this beautiful thing that you're doing. And so how has your paintings and your art, are you still doing that today? How is that, I guess, evolved? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I am painting. I'm painting with more intention now. I've explored a couple of things, painting to be seen in a way as having something else, to offer outside of the career that I had. So what I mean by that is getting out of my comfort zone and trying to market them in a way, monetize them. That has a certain amount of value, and I appreciate what it's kind of forced me to do in terms of, is this a kind of acknowledgement, that I need to put them in the public eye and be able to say I'm accomplished or I'm skilled enough that someone else perceives them as art or perceives them as worthy enough to have in their home or spend money on them, so that's a very complicated process in and of itself. And I'm interested in that. And I still actually kind of, it's hard for me to stand up really tall right now and call myself an artist. I'm still what I feel like very new to it and somewhat naive about the complexities of accepting that type of attention or validation. And it's also, thankfully, not something that I need in order to continue with it.
Okay, so let me just toot her horn since she's not. She's actually has her work in a co-op gallery. Her work sells in different gift shops. She is an official artist, okay? And she has a business called Take Two Redo, where she's able to pull all those threads together of her ability to notice and to just be a natural artist to serve people in the community who want to redecorate or change how their homes look. So check her out, Take Two Redo on Instagram. It's 2 with the number 2, not T-O.
Thank you.
I think with artists or people that because when you make art, it's really vulnerable. It's always like the artist's curse of second guessing yourself, or it's a really difficult act to put your artwork out there because then it's like people's judgment is on it, and that's terrifying because this is something precious to you. I love what you said earlier because it sounds like you went from putting your paintings on whoever that woman was that critiqued your artwork.
Right.
where you're like, do I need to burn these? What do I need to do? To, I don't know if you heard yourself, but you're like, these things are beautiful. So it sounds like you have come to a place where you love them and you cherish them. You see the value in them. And I feel like when that happens, other people do too.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you've talked about nature. We've touched on hiking and discovering artistry. Is there anything else of your passions that you want to share?
Sure. A new area that has been really significant in this transition is me recognizing that in my particular community, there are not a lot of opportunities for single people to connect in some of the areas that I have special interests, which tend to be nature or creativity. I'm not saying that my community doesn't have things happening. It does. But a couple of the areas which are specifically, outdoor involved, there's just lacking any kind of formal opportunity to unite and bring together, people who are like-minded. So I'm super duper duper excited, really just so invigorated by creating some meetups. I've used that term loosely, but ultimately what I'm focused on, in addition to, my artwork and exploring, that, is being able to help organize, because I'm a good organizer, it's one of my strengths, groups to connect with nature. One of those is birding. So I love, love, love birds. I've always loved birds, but with this new space, with this new home was instrumental, because even though I lived on a big 100-acre farm before, the actual landscape around the immediate house was not so conducive to birding. There was undeveloped and uncleared forest, but that took a different type of intentionality to go into that, which I did, but not to bird. So this little house that I'm in now is the perfect environment, because it has, it's old, and the trees around it are well developed and very close to the house. So the birds are just right there, literally surrounding. So all that to say, I have, started giving myself the permission to invest in that. And, birding is a very slow, I'm a very fast-paced, active producer. Birding is not that at all. You have to be still. You have to be quiet. It can take a really long time for that bird to come close enough. All of those things that are so counter to my most obvious way of being, which is really quite beautiful, because it's like just, it's a thread in there that I had to just let it blow around for a while. Now I can tether it in and hold on to it and say, it's okay. You don't have to produce right now. You can just pause and you can just take this in. But of course, also by nature, I want to take it in, but then I want to share it. Mm. So I need to share the excitement, share the enthusiasm, share the opportunity. Because who doesn't want to share what they love with someone else who might also find it equally satisfying? Well, I was having trouble finding people who would take it equally satisfying. My granddaughter, who now can see through a little pair of binoculars, she's 3, and she would hold them up even a year ago. She would hold them up, but she was not seeing through them. Now she can tell you what she sees through them. So we're at a whole nother level.
She knows I'm not the partner or friend that with her. I'm like, ooh, go Laura-Gayle.
Yeah. So I've had to just do the work, and it's amazing. It's just all unfolding. It is just all unfolding. I am so blown away. about how scary it was to say, I'm going to be a birder and I can be proud of it and I don't care what anybody else thinks. If I just don't look cool or if, I look like the grandma, the senior citizen, because that's the stigma to, most birders is that they're the seniors, they're all white-headed, and they don't have anything else in their lives. So they're going to walk around parks with binoculars and scopes and sun hats. And that's the story, right? Well, I'm just going to be one. That's who I am. And it doesn't matter. Because if those are my people, those are my people. And so I started doing some work on finding groups or pages on Facebook. Long story short, I connected with one person who happened to be in, because my town name came up in the post, and I was like, this isn't just the state. This is right here. This is under my nose. I connected with her. It ends up we had a thread from our past. She ended up being one of my oldest daughter's one of her fifth grade teachers. One thing led to another. I approached her a couple of weeks ago and said, let's start a birding group in West Georgia, So I made a connection with, one friend who's a biologist, and then he gave me some contacts. Every one of those people that I've been in touch with in just a matter of days has been so responsive and so enthusiastic that it's just like, the work is effortless. It's not really even work because it's just so fruitful. I'm just so thrilled to have other people want this, and also just other people who need connection. Some people don't want to be connected in this way, but I know there are other people like me who, still have a lot they want to do and have a lot of diversity and interest and want to explore these things and share them with someone else. So, this birding thing is happening. This birding group is happening.
I love the excitement and passion I hear in your voice as you talk about all of your passions, but this newest one. And I remember in one episode, Liz brought up the fact that it's important to have novelty in your life, especially when building relationships. So you mentioned connection. So you're connecting around passion and novelty, and that infuses life,
Yes.
I'm hearing all of the threads for you is about creating space and opportunity and belonging, not just for you, but for other people. And you said, don't people want to share what they love? Not all the time. So I think that is something that's special, that is not just your experience. You want other people to experience it too. And you're finding a way to create home within. And I feel like your direction that you didn't know you were seeking has become clearer, and that you honor those threads and you're not in a rush to tie them all together like we might have in the past, or cut them because you didn't see where they were going. So in this episode, we're talking about, in this last episode, how have we grown? What does home mean for each of us? And we're going to come back to you, Laura-Gayle, to kind of sum it up for you, where you are as far as what home means to you inside and outside. But I would love to hear from Liz, what's going on with you now as far as like home internally? How have you grown doing the podcast? What are you looking forward to? Any lessons? And then we'll just all share and hear what everybody's up to.
Right now, this season of my life in particular has been interesting because in talking about this theme of home and belonging, I've spent the last few years more recently feeling displaced a lot. Mm. And so much and so often that the only, sense of familiarity and home for me was survival mode. Mm-hmm. And now that I am kind of accepting more where I am right now and really trying to find home with my physical and exterior, not just my internal. That has been a shift and a lot of learning for me because my external was always changing. So I was used to that. And it kind of forced me to find home within myself. But now I'm kind of realizing the importance of finding home with the people that I'm living with, the actual physical space that I'm in, and how important that is. Yeah, I've just been appreciating the process of that. And now I'm in a season where I'm moving out of my family home. And I think when I hear Laura-Gayle sharing her story and how she's become more, I guess, emotionally sensitive to the changes that happen with those kind of transitions, I can really resonate with that. I think I'm finally in a place where I'm giving myself the opportunity, the space, and the time to process through that and what it means for my family and my home.
So your overall feeling, is it trepidation? Is it anticipation? Is it hopeful? Like, what is your emotion around it right now?
Right now, it's more hopeful.
Okay.
I think a lot because the home I'm currently in with my family now, I think it carries a lot of pain with, our past and growing up there. And so to now look forward to moving out of that environment, I think will bring it will turn a lot of new leaves, I think, for all of us.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
What about you, Grace?
Well, I relate to Liz in that physical space. I feel like my physical space impacts me a lot. Like if it's too messy, I can't focus. For a really long time, I never felt at home in myself. And I wasn't aware of that until somewhere in my mid-20s. I started to realize that I don't feel fully comfortable in my own skin or like I belong anywhere. And I've moved a lot through my college years. So every year I was moving, not necessarily out of Georgia, but I was just moving into a different apartment or every year packing up. So I never really fully unpacked, or I would never put anything on the walls. I wouldn't decorate. It would just be the bare necessities. And I think that had to do with being in survival mode as well. It wasn't until probably COVID for me too that I had to pause. And I really like what you said, Laura-Gayle, about giving yourself permission to pause. And you even said, give myself permission to watch birds. It's so against your natural tendency because everything needs to have an outcome, something that you've achieved, something that, and bird watching is just that. Like you're just sitting watching birds, like, and I love that. And I feel like I didn't give myself permission to pause until COVID forced me to pause. And I realized that I didn't know how to do it. And we talked about this in some of our previous episodes. So I think my journey in creating spaces of belonging and finding home within myself has been quite a tumultuous one. But I can say that I've now started to unpack. Like I've started to...
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Put things in my physical space. I would always be in the mentality of like, I'm going to move, so what's the point of buying things that I would like in the space? And even though it's a physical thing, it's very symbolic for me to buy like a piece of furniture and things that aren't so easy to move when you move. But I'm like, it's out of the love for myself that I'm giving myself permission to make the space mine. What about you, Fatima?
Well, I think my home journey, as I mentioned, as Laura-Gayle was sharing her story, echoes in some ways Laura-Gayle's. What I'll say is I've always been in the mentality of, on the airplane it says put the mask on yourself first so that you can help others. In my mind, I had it opposite. I was putting the mask on other people and just holding my breath until it was my time. And what I realized is you just got to grab that doggone mask and put it on yourself, because no one's ever going to say, it's your time now. Okay, Mom, it's your turn, or life isn't going to say, okay, we're giving you permission. The universe isn't going to say it. Friends and family aren't going to say it. We just have to make that decision to give ourselves permission. And so that's the season that I'm in right now. I would say, of hearing all of you all, I've always been an introvert, and I've had a big world intellectually and even spiritually, but having a home within, I think I'm probably just embarking on that because of you've heard in other episodes, some of the things that have happened in my family. So I'm so encouraged by hearing Laura-Gayle say, yeah, you're going to see that, because one of my Clifton strengths or Gallup strengths, Finder's top strengths, is interconnectivity. You've got threads out there. Just let them dangle. And when it really starts to manifest, hold on to that thread. And that has been where I've been kind of living internally now, is I know I want to make a big change in my life, a big move physically, mentally, spiritually. But I've been a little bit frustrated because I think I was more trying to just beat the problem and solve the problem, as opposed to what Laura-Gayle is talking about, which is to give myself the time, the space, pause, don't be reactive, and center myself. So all that to say, I'm so hopeful to the future. I feel this home building within. I'm imagining what my external home would look like. I went to a spiritual retreat a week or so ago, and one of the things they kept talking about is when you face these life challenges, our work is to expand our heart, not to close off the challenges, that our heart can contain whatever comes in front of us. And I literally was trying to cut off as many of the distractions, the problems, the challenges, and kind of like escape. I didn't realize that's what I was doing until immersing myself into this spiritual retreat. And so that's kind of gotten me to pause and say, okay, community, family, home is important to you, but also having your time, space, and investment in self is important as well. How can you have both and? They're not mutually exclusive. So I'm interested. We've said a lot today, and I know for the audience, it's a lot to take in. So do we have any lessons? Is there anything else you'd like to share? Laura-Gayle, does anybody have any aha moments or lessons that they'd like to leave with the audience?
Just give yourself permission to pause.
Mm-hmm.
Life is just so busy, it moves so quick, and we don't take time to remember the things that make us feel like little kids, like have that curiosity and play sometimes. I feel like that's really, really important.
I never play. I always tell Laura-Gayle I don't have hobbies. My play is working out.
Yeah, so it's like I feel like we're all artists on the inside, even the people that don't think I'm creative or any of that. We all, as little kids, had big imaginations, big dreams. And I feel like reconnecting with your inner child is a process if you've lost sight of that person. But I feel like that's so important. And like Laura-Gayle said, which I really, really love, and it'll stay with me after this talk, is that those threads are always there. They never went away. You just have to pause and look for them and be curious about yourself. And in terms of being a woman and also being highly sensitive, and it's so cool to me that I've met 3 other women who feel things so deeply and are so attuned with the people around them and the environments around them. And I feel like you can see it as a curse, but I think it's a blessing, and I think it's a gift. And I feel like that ability to notice people is not something many people have. And so in being, what did you call it earlier? Super coordinator or what? Service coordinator?
Service coordinator, right.
You could be a super service.
That's Liz.
I think that's a gift. And I think when you learn how to hone that to serve other people, it's really, really powerful. So I think that any space that you're in, Laura-Gayle, there are ripples being made. I feel like you're such a vibrant light that this gift, I hope you continue to share it with the world. And it's been so nice having this discussion with you. Is there any other lessons or...
Well, before you say that, I wanted to say this because she was truly a lifesaver in a season of my life when I was just so devastated by some things that had happened in my life. And she committed every single day for about a year or more to communicate with me every morning through a voice text. Well, it was a video voice text. And that started a way that we now communicate. Is not every day, but that commitment was all that she had going on to be there as a rock. I just wanted to, publicly say thank you so much for being that lifesaver, that life raft. And I'm just grateful that we've connected and that we've stayed in each other's lives.
Thank you so much. And the feeling is mutual. I hope you know that. And at the time, I'm pretty confident that it was serving me in some grounding capacity as well. So thank you. Thank you for noticing and sharing that. I think something else that has come to mind quickly is in terms of maintaining or finding or even just foraging for the next space or place that you're supposed to be in terms of home, whether that's, internally, spiritually, or your physical space. I think the whole idea of pausing also brings about can bring about a lot of pain and loneliness and additional kind of isolating feelings, because you may be exploring parts of you that you had put on a shelf for a really, really, really long time, but especially in my age group, my age bracket, my generation. So being willing to acknowledge that there may be what on some days feels like more experience in it until the light appears. And when you work through and allow for the loneliness to potentially be there, acknowledge it, the pain from possibly not having or losing or grieving what you thought was going to be, or just the natural. There's also a lot of natural loss that just comes with in my case, with your children maturing and leaving home, etc. The most minute things can come about, like through this conversation and preparation for it. I was reminded of this children's book that was so, and I'm not literary at all. That is not a piece of me that would ever come out in strength. But there's a children's book that I remember being read to me when I was very young, like I'm talking first grade. And even to this day, because I've given myself space, I am able to pull imagery from this story back into present and correlate it to things I experienced in life. It was called The Boxcar Children.
Oh yeah, I remember that. My kids read that.
Now
series.
Now the series, what came second?
Oh, okay.
There was an original, which I'm old enough. You did the series version, right? Which was later. I got the OG.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but these were 4 children who are essentially orphaned into the wilderness. And what they have to survive. They find an abandoned boxcar to live in. They have to create home. Mm-hmm. So these 4 siblings, the whole storyline is how they create and stay together, right? But then they have to create home, and they create home by finding a broken dish in the woods and an empty wooden crate on the side of the road. As fantastical as all that is, for me, as a first grader, I was just like imagining that would be a way to survive, that you could really do this like the Boxcar Children did, should the need arise.
You were ready.
I was ready. I knew that I could find these things. Maybe not a boxcar, but I could make it. And so as my childhood progressed, as my young adulthood progressed, and some of these things, figuratively did transpire. And so in a way, I have the broken teacup, I have the wooden crate, I have the capacity to pull these things together and create a beautiful space that I can call home, that I can find comfort in, and I can, they came home at the end of the day. where they were during the day, 4 children, I'm not sure, but somehow the oldest one generated an income. They shared a slice of bread, all the things, right? But it's just so interesting as an almost 61-year-old to say, I am a boxcar child, and I can pull together the broken pieces or the fragments or the things necessary to create a sense of home in order to find not just survival, but joy. Mm-hmm. And that's what those 4 children did in that story plot.
I love that. I feel like this has been a beautiful wrap up of our whole exploration of what a lot of people are experiencing. And we're hoping that today you'll take some time to really reflect, to be still, to pause, to notice not just the people and things around you, but notice yourself and appreciate yourself and see yourself, because we don't always do that. We're excited to wrap our first season. I'm so grateful to Liz to agree to embark on this journey, and then Grace joined on, and special kudos to Grace, because not only is she hostess with the mostest on air, she's also the editor and chief of production. So we're very grateful for her. And so as we wrap up the first season, we thank everyone who listened, who shared, who subscribed. If you're new today, please like, follow, share, and subscribe so that you can be updated when our second season comes out, where we're going to continue to talk to exciting people who had maybe ordinary starts, but now they have done extraordinary things and become extraordinary humans that we want you to hear from. Thank you all so much for joining us. Until season 2.